The morning Gloria Brooks wasn't behind the counter. Noah Whitman felt the silence before he understood what was missing. The cafeteria at Ridgeview High sounded the way it always did at 7:18 a.m. Metal lunch trays knocking against rails, sneakers squeaking across wax tile, the low roar of half-awake teenagers talking too loud because nobody wanted to admit they were tired. The air carried the usual mix of powdered eggs, buttered toast, industrial coffee, and lemon cleaners still drying on the tables. Fluorescent light spilled over everything in a cold, flat sheen, catching on the stainless steel sneeze guard and the rows of sealed milk cartons stacked in neat blue and white towers. Nothing looked different. That was the strange part. Everything was exactly the same, except for the one thing that made the whole room feel steady. Noah moved forward with the line, one hand curled around the strap of his backpack, the other shoved into the pocket of his gray hoodie. He was 17, tall in the unfinished way boys sometimes are, all angles and silence, with the kind of face teachers called thoughtful when what they really meant was hard to read. He kept his eyes low the way he always did in the mornings. Not because he was shy. Not exactly. More because looking up invited things, questions, jokes, concern, the forced cheerfulness adults liked to wear before first period. Usually, by the time he reached the front of the line, Gloria would already have his tray half ready without asking. Turkey sausage if they had it. Wheat toast, never white. Apple slices instead of peaches. And if the milk at the front of the crate wasn't cold enough, she would reach deeper, all without a word, and hand him one from the back. She never acted like she was doing anything special. She just did it, the same way sunrise happens, quiet, regular, easy to take for granted. But that morning there was no soft good morning, baby from the other side of the counter. No brown hand sliding a carton of 2% milk into place. No floral cardigan under the cafeteria apron. No reading glasses low on her nose. In her place stood a younger woman Noah had seen once or twice before, maybe a substitute, maybe someone from the middle school kitchen, her hair tied up too tight, her movements rushed and unfamiliar. She dropped scrambled eggs onto trays without looking at faces. She asked the same question in the same tired voice to every student. Sausage or no sausage? Toast or biscuit? Noah stepped up when it was his turn, and for the first time in months, maybe longer, the tray in front of him looked like it belonged to someone else. The woman set down peaches, white bread, chocolate milk, things Gloria would have known he never touched. Noah opened his mouth, not even sure what he was going to say. Not thank you. He never said that. Something smaller, maybe. Something practical. But before the words could settle into shape, the girl behind him bumped his shoulder with her tray and said, "Move, Whitman. You're holding up the line." He shifted aside automatically, tray in hand, the peaches trembling in their syrup cup, and glanced past the counter toward the small wooden stool tucked near the register. Gloria's seat. Empty. Not pushed in. Not pulled out. Just empty, like she had stood up for a second and meant to come right back. Noah stared at it longer than he should have. Around him, the cafeteria kept moving, loud and careless and alive. But somewhere beneath the clatter of forks and voices and morning announcements crackling through the overhead speakers, a quiet unease slipped into his chest. He didn't have a name for it yet. He only knew this. For the first time all year, breakfast felt cold before he even sat down. Noah carried the wrong tray to his usual table by the east windows, but he did not sit down right away. He stood there with the peaches shining under the cafeteria lights and the chocolate milk sweating against the plastic seal, and all at once his mind began doing something he had not asked it to do. It started pulling Gloria Brooks back into the room, not as one big memory, but in small pieces, the kind people miss while they are still happening. She had always been there before the first wave of students came in, standing beneath the hanging menu board with her apron tied high and neat, steam curling up from the trays in front of her. Her shoes were practical, black, and soft-soled, the kind that made almost no sound on tile. Her cardigan changed with the weather. Navy when the halls felt drafty in October. Pale green in the spring. Sometimes a burgundy one with a loose thread near the cuff that she would roll between her fingers while waiting for the next student to step forward. She moved fast, but never in a way that felt hurried. More like she had made peace with being needed from every direction at once. Noah had noticed all of that without ever admitting he noticed it. He remembered the way she used to tilt her head when a kid said they were not hungry, like she could hear the lie underneath the words. He remembered how she never embarrassed anyone. If someone forgot their lunch number, she would lower her voice. If someone came up short $1.25, she would say, "You are all right, baby, I will handle it," and slide the tray over before the cashier could make it into a moment. She remembered allergies, favorite fruit cups, who hated oatmeal, who needed extra napkins, who had braces and could not chew the bagels when they came out too hard. And somehow, without ever making a speech about kindness, she carried the whole line like it mattered. Noah had been one of her quiet routines. She knew he always came through at nearly the same time, usually alone, usually tired, usually with that closed-off look that said he had already spent too much energy before the school day even began. She never asked him what was wrong. That was part of why he kept coming to her window instead of cutting class or grabbing vending machine chips like some of the other juniors did. She would just look once at his face and adjust the tray. Apple slices instead of peaches. Wheat toast instead of white. Milk from the coldest crate. On mornings when his eyes were red, there would be an extra packet of grape jelly. On mornings when he looked pale, she would nudge a banana to the corner of the tray like it had always belonged there. Noah never thanked her. Not once. He took the tray with one hand, gave the smallest nod if he was feeling polite, and moved on. At the time, it had not felt cruel. It had felt normal, the way people accept heat from a vent in winter or expect the traffic lights to change when they should. Gloria was simply part of the machinery of mourning, steady and unnamed in the places that kept a day from falling apart. But standing there now, with peaches he would not eat and bread he did not want, Noah realized that Gloria had never acted like a machine. She had acted like someone who saw every hungry kid in that room and decided, quietly and over again, that being seen should come with something warm on a tray. By third period, Noah still had not touched the peaches. The plastic cup sat unopened in the side pocket of his backpack, bumping softly against his algebra notebook every time he shifted in his seat. And for some reason, that small sound followed him through the day like a question he did not know how to answer. He had spent so long acting like breakfast was just breakfast that he had never stopped to ask why he came to school hungry in the first place. Not always in his stomach, but somewhere deeper, somewhere that never felt full no matter how orderly his life looked from the outside. The Whitman house on Briar Glen Drive was the kind of place people called nice without thinking twice. 2 stories, clean shutters, trimmed hedges, a flagstone walkway his father paid a landscaping crew to keep spotless in every season. Inside, everything matched. The throw pillows, the stainless steel appliances, the framed black and white photos lined in perfect rows along the hallway. But after Noah's mother died 3 years earlier, the house had taken on a strange kind of polish, as if every surface had been wiped so clean there was no room left for grief to land. His father, Robert Whitman, handled loss the way he handled bills, traffic, and difficult phone calls. Quietly, efficiently, without lingering. He worked in commercial real estate and left before sunrise most mornings in a navy suit that always smelled faintly of starch and cedar aftershave. Some nights, he came home after 8 with takeout containers and a tired look that said the day had already spent whatever softness he might have had. He was not cruel. That was what made it harder to explain. He made sure there was money in Noah's account, clean towels in the linen closet, gas in the car once Noah got his permit. He remembered dentist appointments and parent portal passwords, and whether the homeowner's insurance had been renewed. But there were whole weeks when the only words between them were practical ones. "There is pasta in the fridge. Do not forget your charger. I will be late tonight." At first, after Noah's mother passed, people came around with casseroles, lowered voices, and that tender expression adults wear when they are waiting for a child to break. Noah never gave them the scene they expected. He did not cry in public. He did not act out. He did not start fights or skip school or slam doors. He simply got quieter, which adults often mistake for strength because silence is easier to live with than visible pain. His mother had been the opposite of quiet. Laura Whitman filled rooms without trying. She sang under her breath while folding laundry, left handwritten notes by the coffee maker, and believed every meal should feel like someone had meant for you to have it. Even on rushed mornings, she would slide a plate in front of Noah and smooth the front of his shirt with one warm hand before sending him out the door. After she was gone, the mornings became mechanical. The kitchen clock ticked louder. The refrigerator hummed. The coffee maker sputtered. Noah learned to pour cereal, then learned to skip it, then learned how easy it was to tell himself he was not hungry when really he just did not want to stand in that cold kitchen any longer than he had to. Somewhere along the way, Ridgeview High began to fill in the spaces his house no longer could. Not the classes, not the noise. Just one corner of one room beneath cafeteria lights where a woman named Gloria Brooks never asked him to explain the heaviness in his face. She simply met it with warm toast, cold milk, and the kind of steady attention that made a person feel, for 10 seconds at a time, like disappearing had not worked after all. What Noah had never understood was that Gloria's kindness was not random. It had a rhythm to it, almost like a private system built from years of watching people hurry past one another without really seeing what they carried. The next day at lunch, even with Gloria still gone, he found himself noticing the places where her routine used to live. The napkin dispenser by the register had always been turned just slightly toward the shorter kids so they would not have to stretch. The plastic forks had always been separated from the spoons before the rush hit, because she knew freshmen froze under pressure and held up the line when they had to sort through a tangled bin. The salt packets were never spilled, the ketchup pump was always wiped clean, and the basket of bruised bananas that nobody wanted somehow disappeared by the end of the period, because Gloria knew exactly which students would take one if she peeled back the stem and set it where it looked less forgotten. Noah had seen all of it for months without once realizing he was looking at a person's care made visible. Gloria had a way of helping that never sounded like help. She did not hover. She did not make a performance out of concern. She worked in adjustments, little course corrections, so gentle, most people never noticed she had saved them a moment of embarrassment. A kid with shaky hands would suddenly get a sturdier tray. A girl trying to hide tears after a breakup would find 2 chocolate chip cookies on her plate, and no charge added. One of the football players with a cast on his wrist would come through the line, and Gloria would already have the milk carton opened before he reached for it. There was a sophomore named Lena who wore oversized sweatshirts even in warm weather and always counted coins twice before paying. Gloria never once said, "You are short." She would just tap the register screen with one finger, smile that small knowing smile of hers, and say, "It is school spirit day, baby, dessert is included." Then Lena would blink like she knew it was not true, but was too relieved to argue. That was Gloria's gift. She let people keep their dignity. Noah remembered one rainy Tuesday in November when he had come in with his hoodie damp and his sneakers squeaking against the tile. He had not slept much the night before. His father had been away in Charlotte for a conference. The house had groaned all night under the wind, and something about the dark had made everything feel older than it was. Noah had stepped up to the counter, eyes half-focused, ready to take whatever landed on the tray and leave. Gloria had looked at him once, only once, and reached for a biscuit instead of toast. Then she added a small sealed cup of strawberry jam and slid it to the edge nearest his hand. No comment, no question, just that. He had nearly said he did not want it, but when he sat down by the east windows and opened the cup, the smell hit him first, warm flour and something buttery underneath, and for a second he was back in his mother's kitchen on a Sunday morning years earlier. He had eaten every bite. Now, sitting in that same cafeteria with the wrong lunch and the wrong woman behind the counter, Noah began to understand that Gloria had not simply been serving food. She had been reading the room, reading faces, reading silences, and answering them the only way she could, one tray at a time. The first person to say it out loud was a girl from the register, and she did not mean for anyone beyond the counter to hear. It was Friday, just before the lunch rush, and Noah had come in early on the excuse of returning a library book he had forgotten in his locker, though really he had started drifting past the cafeteria more often now, as if answers might rise out of the smell of baked chicken and floor polish if he stood close enough. He was halfway to the water fountain when he caught the cashier speaking in a low, tired voice to the substitute manager while they sorted receipts beside the stainless steel counter. "I told her she could not keep doing that," the girl said, tapping a stack of account printouts with one chipped fingernail. $50 here, 20 there, lunch debt wiped out like it is nothing. The manager let out a quiet breath. Gloria always said hungry kids cannot learn. Noah slowed without meaning to. The hallway noise around him blurred into locker doors and sneakers and distant laughter, but that sentence stayed clear. Hungry kids cannot learn. He did not move closer. He just stood by the cinder block wall with the cold metal of the fountain against his sleeve and listened. The cashier lowered her voice even more. She was covering balances again last month. I saw it when I closed the register. Half these kids did not even know. She would say there had been an adjustment or a district credit. The manager shook her head and started aligning the receipts into a clean square. That was Gloria. Did not want anybody feeling ashamed over a tray and a carton of milk. Noah felt something tighten under his ribs. He knew what lunch debt was, of course. Everyone did. The school sent those bland, careful emails about account balances and nutrition policy, and sometimes kids would joke about being broke in the line, laughing too loud so nobody could tell if they were embarrassed. But Gloria had never let the moment stick to anyone. Now Noah began to replay things he had dismissed at the time. The way she sometimes pressed the register button twice and frowned at the screen as if correcting a computer error. The way she would wave a student through with a soft, "Keep going, baby, you are fine," before the cashier could say there was a problem. The way certain kids looked at her with relief that was too quick, too practiced, to belong to one lucky day. He thought of Lena in the oversized sweatshirts. A seventh grader from the middle school once visiting with his older brother, clutching his tray with both hands like he expected it to be taken back. The quiet boy from chemistry who always got double vegetables, but never dessert unless Gloria was working. And then, with a strange little drop in his stomach, Noah thought of himself. He had never needed help paying. His father kept money in the account, sometimes more than enough. But there had been mornings when Noah showed up after forgetting his number, mornings when he had grabbed breakfast without checking the balance after weeks of not paying attention, mornings when Gloria seemed to know before the screen did that something inside him was already coming apart. She had still made the tray look whole. She had still slid it forward like no child standing in a school cafeteria should ever have to feel poor in front of strangers, whether the poverty was in a wallet or somewhere no one could see. Noah looked through the glass doors into the empty serving line, at the polished rails and stacked trays waiting for the next bell, and for the first time he understood that Gloria had been spending more than money all those months. She had been spending herself, a little at a time, quietly covering the cost of other people's mornings. The note found him on a Monday morning tucked beneath the edge of his tray, so small he almost missed it. Noah had come through the breakfast line half distracted, still thinking about what he had overheard on Friday, still carrying around the uncomfortable weight of knowing Gloria had been paying for other people in ways no one was meant to notice. The substitute woman was back again, moving briskly, asking the same flat questions, setting down the same indifferent portions. Wheat toast, scrambled eggs, apple slices this time, because Noah had asked for them before he could stop himself, the request feeling strange in his own mouth, like he had borrowed it from an older version of the room. He picked up the tray and turned toward the windows, and that was when he saw the folded square of white tucked under the paper napkin near his fork. It was not official school paper, not a receipt, just a plain little piece torn from something larger, folded once with care. Noah sat down slowly. Around him the cafeteria swelled with noise, chairs scraping, somebody laughing too hard near the vending machines, the morning announcements crackling overhead about parking decals and the spring blood drive. But the sound seemed to drift several feet away from him as he slipped the paper open. The handwriting was familiar the second he saw it. Round, steady letters in dark blue ink, the kind that looked like they had been formed patiently over a lifetime of grocery lists, church bulletins, birthday cards, and notes passed to people who needed gentleness more than advice. It said, "You do not have to talk for people to know you are hurting. Just eat something warm today." Noah stared at the line until the words blurred. There was no name at the bottom. There did not need to be. He could hear Gloria's voice in the shape of every letter, that soft, low way she said baby, as if it were less a nickname than a shelter. He turned the paper over, half expecting something else, some explanation of when she had written it or why she had chosen that morning. There was nothing on the back, just the faint imprint of the words pressed through by her pen. Noah looked toward the counter on instinct, toward the little wooden stool, the register, the steam tray where the eggs sat under heat lamps. Empty again. The substitute was helping a freshman peel the lid off a yogurt cup. No one was looking at him. Noah folded the note once, then again, more carefully than he usually handled anything, and slipped it into the front pocket of his hoodie. He should have eaten. He knew that. The eggs were still hot enough to send up a little thread of steam when he lifted his fork. But his throat had tightened in that quiet, stubborn way it did when emotion showed up without permission. Not dramatic, not even obvious, just enough to make swallowing feel like work. He forced down a bite of toast instead, dry at first, then softer once the butter hit his tongue. Warm. That had been Gloria's word. Not healthy. Not enough. Not finish your breakfast. Warm. As if she understood that some mornings what a person needed was not nutrition or discipline or another adult asking if everything was all right. Some mornings they just needed something that did not feel cold in their hands. Noah sat there longer than usual, one hand in his hoodie pocket, fingers resting against the folded note like it might disappear if he let go. And for the first time since Gloria had been gone, he let himself admit a truth that made his chest ache. She had known. Maybe not every detail. Maybe not the shape of the empty house on Briar Glen or the silence at his dinner table or the way grief could sit beside a person for years and still feel newly arrived. But she had known enough. Enough to write one sentence. Enough to leave it where his hand would find it. Enough to reach him without asking him to explain a thing. That afternoon the note stayed in Noah's pocket like a small warm weight. And by the time the final bell rang, he could not stop replaying the last morning Gloria had actually been there, turning it over in his mind the way people worry a loose tooth with their tongue after they realize something is wrong. It had been the Thursday before she disappeared, gray and damp outside, with a low ceiling of clouds pressing over Ridgeview High and rainwater beating on the cafeteria windows. Noah remembered the smell first. Cinnamon from the French toast sticks, coffee from the faculty urn near the side counter, and that clean sharp trace of bleach that always lingered in the air before first period. He had come in later than usual because his history teacher had stopped him in the hallway about a missing worksheet, and by the time he reached the line a clump of sophomores in marching band jackets had already crowded the serving station. Gloria was moving a little slower that morning. Not slow enough for most people to notice, but no one noticed now in memory. The tray tongs stayed in her hand, half a second longer between motions. She leaned one palm against the metal rail when the rush thickened. Once, while reaching for a stack of napkins, she paused to draw a breath that sounded deeper than it should have. At the time he had told himself she was just tired. Adults were always tired. Teachers, cashiers, bus drivers, his father. Tired was ordinary. But then Gloria turned to lift a fresh crate of milk from the cooler below the counter, and a rough little cough rose out of her before she could hide it. It was not loud, just enough to bend her shoulders for a moment and make the cashier beside her glance over. Gloria smiled anyway, that same quiet smile she used whenever she wanted to smooth away concern before it had the chance to become awkward. "I am all right, baby," she had said to the cashier, and then to the next student in line, "Pancakes or cereal?" Noah remembered stepping forward just then, tray in hand, his backpack sliding off one shoulder. Gloria looked up and saw him. Something changed in her face, not dramatic, just a softening around the eyes like she had expected him. She set down the pancakes without asking, added apple slices, reached deeper into the milk crate, and chose the coldest carton, the one with condensation already gathering on its sides. Then she straightened, one hand resting briefly against the counter edge, and gave him that familiar glance that seemed to take in more than he ever offered. "You need an extra napkin today," she said softly. Noah blinked. He had not realized until then that there was a faint ink smear across the side of his hand from a pen leaking in his hoodie pocket. Gloria slid 2 napkins onto the tray instead of one. Her fingers were steady, but the skin around her knuckles looked tired somehow, dry from soap and sanitizer and heat. Noah should have said something then. He knew that now with the cruel clarity only hindsight gives. Not a speech. Not anything big. Just one simple human sentence. "Are you okay? You should sit down. Thank you." Any of them would have been enough to crack the surface of that ordinary morning. But before the words could rise, one of the marching band boys behind him called out for syrup. Someone near the cereal station dropped a spoon with a loud metallic clatter, and the whole room surged forward in its usual careless rhythm. Trey with a quick, distracted motion and turned to the next student before he could step away. Noah found himself looking again toward the little wooden stool near the register. Empty. Not just empty now, but wrong in a way he could not explain. Gloria had made that spot feel occupied even when she was turned toward the ovens or bent to lift a milk crate or helping the cashier sort receipts. Her presence had filled the space around her. Without it, the stool looked less like a seat and more like a missing tooth in the room's smile. He sat by the east windows and watched the line move. Students came and went in waves, sleepy, loud, careless, hungry, their backpacks brushing chair backs, their voices bouncing off cinder block walls and trophy case glass. Most of them barely seemed to notice. A few frowned at the substitute's mistakes. A freshman girl asked where Miss Gloria was and got only a vague answer from the cashier. Out sick, baby. That was all. The girl nodded and moved on, but Noah did not. Out sick. The phrase felt too small, too thin for the ache it left behind. It did not explain the note. It did not explain the cashier's hushed voice last Friday, or the cough Gloria had tried to bury behind a smile, or the way she had kept spending herself in pieces until there was apparently not enough left to bring to school. Noah picked up his fork and put it down again. At the next table, two boys from his economics class were complaining that the new lady never remembered who wanted extra ketchup. One of them laughed and said, "Gloria used to know everybody's whole life story." Noah looked down at his tray. That was not true, not exactly. Gloria had never demanded stories. She had done something harder. She had treated people with care before they earned it, before they explained themselves, before they even knew how much they needed it. The realization moved through him slowly, but once it arrived it would not leave. For months he had let her kindness pass over him like background noise. Now the silence she left behind was loud enough to follow him everywhere, from the clatter of breakfast trays to the stillness of his first period desk, and for the first time in a long while. Noah did not want to simply carry that feeling until it dulled. He wanted to know where she was. That same afternoon, Noah did something so unlike himself that he almost turned around twice before he reached the cafeteria again. He stayed after the last bell. The hallways had thinned to the hollow after-school quiet he usually avoided. That strange in-between. It went. Noah frowned slightly. Were what went? Leftovers, the cashier said. Before the district got stricter, Gloria used to take whatever was still sealed and make sure it found the right kids before they got on the late buses. Not officially, mind you. Just quietly. She would say some children carry their hunger home in their backpacks. Noah stood very still. The words seemed to open another hidden room inside everything he thought he understood. The cashier kept talking, not dramatic, just matter-of-fact in the way people speak when kindness has been repeated so often it begins to sound ordinary. She knew which siblings waited for an older brother after tutoring and had not had lunch since 10:30. She knew which kids from the apartment complex off Martin Street would not get dinner until their mama came off the second shift. Sometimes she packed little extra bags with crackers and fruit cups and wrote names in marker so nobody would have to ask in front of people. Noah stared at the trays again, but now he did not see food. He saw Gloria's hands folding paper sacks, writing in blue marker, pressing lids tight so nothing spilled on the bus ride home. He saw her moving through the school day with that same steady grace, carrying breakfast on one side of the line and unseen need on the other. Hungry kids cannot learn, the cashier said softly, almost to herself this time. Then she looked back at Noah. Gloria believed that with her whole heart. Noah swallowed hard. For months he had thought Gloria was feeding him. Standing in that quiet cafeteria after school, with the lights reflecting pale gold on the empty counter and cardboard trays waiting by the door, he realized she had been feeding far more than the students who stood in front of her line. She had been trying to hold together the hours after the bell, too. The next morning, Noah did not go straight to first period. Instead, he stood outside the front office with the folded note in his hoodie pocket and the smell of floor wax rising faintly from the hallway, trying to talk himself out of doing something that felt too personal and not personal enough at the same time. Through the glass, he could see Principal Helen Ward at her desk, reading glasses low on her nose, one hand turning pages while the other cradled a paper cup of coffee gone half cold. She had the kind of office that looked both orderly and lived in, with framed class photos on one wall, a potted plant by the window, and a bowl of peppermints near the visitor chair that no student ever seemed brave enough to take. When she looked up and saw Noah standing there, her expression shifted in quiet surprise. Noah Whitman. Everything all right? He stepped inside, the door closing softly behind him. The question hung there for a second. He almost answered the usual way. Yes, ma'am. Fine. But Gloria's note pressed against his chest through the fabric of his hoodie, and for once fine felt too dishonest to use. I wanted to ask about Miss Gloria, he said. Principal Ward studied him for a moment. Not suspicious, just careful. Then she set down her pen. Close the door, please. Noah did. The office seemed smaller after that, the hum of the hallway falling away until all he could hear was the faint tick of the wall clock and the whisper of the heating vent beneath the window. Principal Ward folded her hands on the desk. She is resting, she said gently. The doctors told her she pushed herself too hard for too long. Noah looked down at the edge of the chair in front of him, but did not sit. Is she going to be okay? We hope so, Principal Ward said, and the honesty in those 3 words made his throat tighten. Then her eyes softened in a different way, as if she were noticing something she had not expected to find. You cared about her. Noah almost laughed at the inadequacy of that sentence. He had not thanked Gloria. He had not asked if she needed help. He had not even realized how much of his mornings were held together by her hands until those hands were gone. But he nodded anyway. Principal Ward opened the top drawer of her desk and took out a cream-colored envelope with Noah's last name written across the front in familiar blue ink. For a second the room tilted. She left this with me before the ambulance came, the principal said quietly. She told me if she missed a few days, and if you ever asked, I should give it to you. Noah stared at the envelope without touching it. His name was not there. Just Whitman, written in the same patient hand as the note in his pocket. He finally took it, the paper warm from where it had rested in the principal's drawer. Inside was a photograph, slightly faded at the corners. Noah pulled it free and felt his breath catch. It was the old cafeteria, years younger but unmistakable, the walls painted the same pale beige, the serving counter shorter, the light coming in softer through narrower windows. Behind the counter stood Gloria Brooks, younger too, fuller in the face, smiling with both hands wrapped around a tray of rolls. And beside her, wearing a volunteer apron and laughing at something just outside the frame, was Noah's mother, Laura Whitman. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, her smile bright and easy, one hand flour-dusted at the wrist. Noah lowered himself into the chair without realizing he was doing it. On the back of the photo, in Gloria's handwriting, were 8 words that seemed to split open every quiet room inside him. Your mama always thanked the people nobody saw. Noah carried the photograph home in the front pocket of his backpack, tucked between his chemistry folder and the folded note, as if the 2 pieces of paper belonged together, one from the past and one from the present, both saying the same thing in different ways. Outside, the late afternoon sky hung low and silver over Briar Glen Drive, and the Whitman house looked the way it always did when he pulled into the driveway after school. Clean windows, trimmed hedges, the porch light still off because no one was expected yet. But that evening, for once, Noah did not go straight upstairs or heat something from the freezer and eat standing over the sink. He waited at the kitchen island with the photograph in his hand until he heard his father's car in the garage and the soft mechanical roll of the door closing behind it. Robert Whitman came in loosening his tie, tiredness already settled into his face, a paper cup from some coffee placed still in one hand. He looked up, surprised to find Noah waiting. Everything okay? Noah did not answer right away. He just set the photograph on the granite countertop and slid it across. Robert's hand stopped halfway to the mail stack. He looked down, and all at once the efficient composure he wore like a second shirt seemed to loosen at the collar. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he picked up the picture carefully, like it might tear if he breathed wrong. Where did you get this? Principal Ward, Noah said. Miss Gloria left it for me. Robert stared at the younger version of Laura Whitman smiling in that old cafeteria apron, flour on her wrist, joy all over her face in a way Noah had almost forgotten people could wear joy. Your mother volunteered there every Thursday for 2 years, he said quietly. Even after you were born. Said serving food was not really about food if you did it right. Noah swallowed. He had to try twice before the next sentence came out steady. Gloria is in the hospital. Robert looked up sharply. Hospital. They said she pushed herself too hard for too long. The kitchen went still except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint click of the ice maker settling in the freezer door. Robert set the photograph down and leaned both palms against the counter, eyes lowered, as if some private arithmetic had suddenly stopped adding up. Your mother loved her, he said after a while. Said Gloria remembered people. Really remembered them. Noah let out a breath that trembled on the way out. She remembered me too, he said, and that was the sentence that finally undid him, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true in a place he had been too numb to touch until now. His vision blurred before he could stop it. He looked away, embarrassed by the heat rising behind his eyes. But the tears came anyway, quiet and relentless, spilling not from one sharp hurt, but from the slow crushing realization that someone had been caring for him, noticing him, feeding what was empty in him for months, and he had stood there with a tray in his hands and acted like kindness was part of the wallpaper. Robert saw it. For once he did not reach for a practical sentence or tell Noah to take a breath or ask if he wanted water. He just came around the island and stood beside him, uncertain at first, then rested one hand between Noah's shoulders in a gesture so unfamiliar it felt almost fragile. "We should go see her," he said. Noah nodded before he could speak. An hour later they were walking through the sliding glass doors of St. Anne's Medical Center, the air inside cool, and carrying that unmistakable hospital smell of sanitizer, coffee, and overheated blankets. Noah had the note in one pocket and the photograph in the other. Beside him, his father moved more quietly than usual, as if the building itself required a different kind of man. At the nurse's desk on the 4th floor, Noah gave Gloria's name, and when the woman pointed them down a softly lit hallway lined with pale green walls and framed watercolor prints, his chest tightened with every step. He had not cried because Gloria was gone. He cried because she had been there, again and again, and he had only learned the shape of that gift after it left the room. Gloria's room was at the end of the hallway near a window that looked out over the employee parking lot and a row of bare maple trees just beginning to green at the tips. The evening light had turned thin and honey-colored by the time Noah and his father reached her door, and for a second Noah could only stand there with his hand on the frame, listening to the soft mechanical rhythm of the monitor inside and the muted wheels of a cart passing somewhere farther down the hall. Gloria Brooks looked smaller in the hospital bed than she ever had behind the cafeteria counter. Without the apron and cardigan, without the steam and morning rush and the constant motion of her hands, she seemed almost weightless beneath the pale blanket. Her reading glasses rested folded on the bedside table beside a paper cup, a vase with 3 supermarket carnations, and a devotional booklet with a ribbon tucked halfway through. But when she turned her head and saw Noah in the doorway, the same warmth came into her face, soft and immediate, as if she had been expecting him all along. "Well now," she said, her voice thinner than usual, but still unmistakably hers. "Look who finally decided to visit me without a tray in his hands." Noah let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh, though his throat hurt too much for it. Robert stepped in behind him, and the moment Gloria saw him, her eyes widened with quiet recognition. "Robert Whitman," she said, "you have gone silver on me." Robert smiled in a way Noah had not seen in years, tired and real at the same time. "So have I earned the right," Gloria replied, and the room softened around that small exchange, some old thread of memory pulling gently between them. Noah moved closer to the bed. The note was in his pocket. The photograph was too. He had imagined this moment 3 different ways on the drive over, each one failing the second he saw her there. He thought he might apologize first, or explain, or say thank you in the clear, simple way he should have said it months ago. Instead, he stood with both hands hanging awkwardly at his sides and said the truest thing he had. "I did not know." Gloria looked at him for a long second, not confused, not offended, just listening the way she always had. Then she nodded once. "I know, baby." That nearly broke him all over again. Noah looked down at the blanket, at Gloria's hands resting on top of it, the same hands that had opened milk cartons, folded napkins, pressed fruit cups into paper sacks for kids who needed more than the school day gave them. "I should have said thank you," he said quietly. "A long time ago." "You should have eaten your peaches too," Gloria said, and this time Noah did laugh, one short breath of it, startled and wet around the edges. Gloria's smile deepened, but only for a second before tiredness settled back over her features. Robert pulled a chair closer and sat, elbows on his knees. "Principal Ward told us you have been doing too much for too many people," he said. Gloria looked out toward the window where the light was fading over the cars below. "Somebody had to keep an eye on those babies," she murmured. Robert glanced at Noah, then back at her. "He is going to help now," he said. Noah lifted his head. The words surprised him because his father had said them as fact, not suggestion, and because the moment he heard them, he knew they were true. On the drive over, while the city blurred past in red brake lights and neon pharmacy signs, he had already begun seeing what had to happen next. By the time he left Gloria's room that Night. He had a list in his notes app. First, he would ask Principal Ward about starting an anonymous meal fund in Gloria's name. Then he would stay after school and help sort sealed leftovers the way Gloria used to, properly, with permission if he could get it, and quietly if he could not. He would ask the student council for help, ask the booster club for donations, ask his father to match whatever came in. He would not let the little wooden stool behind the counter become just another empty place people adjusted to. Standing by Gloria's bed, with the hospital lights low and the monitor blinking green in the dim room, Noah finally understood that gratitude was not something you felt once and called done. Sometimes it was something you built with your own hands after the person who taught it to you could no longer carry the weight alone. Gloria came back to Ridgeview on a Thursday morning 3 weeks later, just after the first warm stretch of April had softened the air and turned the maple trees outside the cafeteria windows a brighter green. Noah saw her before most of the students did. He had been there early, helping the kitchen staff set out fruit cups and straighten the milk crates the way he had learned to do over the past days. Careful hands, labels forward, lids checked twice. The Anonymous Meal Fund had already started helping students whose account balances used to sink quietly into red, and every afternoon a small team of volunteers now sorted sealed leftovers into neat paper bags for the late bus route. Principal Ward had approved it all with one hand pressed to her heart, and tears she pretended were allergies. Robert Whitman had matched the first donation amount without being asked twice. The little wooden stool behind the counter had stayed empty the whole time, not because no one needed it, but because some absences deserved to be honored before they were replaced. That morning, the cafeteria still held the familiar smell of syrup, coffee, and sanitizer, but under it there was something lighter, almost electric, the feeling a room gets when good news arrives before the words do. Noah was stacking napkins near the register when the side door opened and Gloria Brooks stepped in wearing her pale green cardigan over a fresh apron, one hand on the strap of her purse, the other holding her reading glasses. She looked thinner, yes, and she moved more slowly, but the smile she gave the room carried the same quiet warmth that had once held so many mornings together without anyone noticing. For a second nobody spoke. Then the cashier gasped. One of the kitchen workers clapped a flour-dusted hand over her mouth, and a freshman near the juice cooler whispered, "Miss Gloria is back," as if saying it too loud might scare the moment away. Gloria laughed softly and shook her head. "Hush now, babies," she said. "I only went and got myself some rest." Noah stood frozen with a stack of napkins in his hands and a strange pressure rising behind his eyes. He had pictured this return so many times that the real thing felt almost too gentle to believe. Gloria's gaze found him across the counter, and the look on her face changed in that familiar way, a softness entering it as if she could read his whole chest from 20 feet away. "Well," she said, "would you look at that?" The quiet boy learned how to stand still long enough to be useful. A few students laughed, but Noah did not. He set the napkins down, reached beneath the register, and brought out the small sign he had hidden there before dawn. It was simple, just white cardstock in a clear plastic holder, but the letters were steady because he had written them twice to get them right. He placed it carefully beside the wooden stool where the morning light from the east windows could catch it. Reserved for the woman who fed more than hunger. The room went still in a different way then, not shocked, not awkward, just full. Full of understanding, of witness, of the kind of silence that does not come from emptiness, but from meaning landing all at once. Gloria looked at the sign, then at Noah, and her eyes turned bright behind her glasses. Noah stepped forward with a tray in his hands, the same way he had done 100 thoughtless mornings before. Only this time he stopped at the counter and met her eyes fully. "Thank you," he said, and his voice did not shake the way he feared it might. "Thank you for seeing me before I knew I was disappearing." Gloria pressed one hand to the edge of the counter, breathing in slowly as if the words had found a place in her that even rest could not reach. Then she smiled, the deep, tired, beautiful smile of someone who had spent a lifetime giving and was humble enough to receive. "You are here now, baby," she said. "That is enough." Noah nodded, but he knew she was wrong in the gentlest possible way. It was not just enough. It was everything. Behind her, the little stool was no longer the saddest thing in the room. Sunlight rested across its seat, across the sign, across Gloria's hands as they moved once more over trays and napkins and cold milk cartons. Around them, the cafeteria woke into its usual noise, students talking, chairs scraping, announcements crackling overhead. But somewhere inside all that ordinary sound, a quiet boy finally understood what his mother had known, what Gloria had lived,